There's been a debate for years now. Does cannabis cause schizophrenia or increase the risk of schizophrenia? Or does it just produce schizophrenia in people who are going to get it anyway, or in vulnerable people? And so it's been going on for years. And I think the consensus is that cannabis, there is a cause and effect relationship with schizophrenia, but it's still debated. There's been a natural experiment in Canada, where Canada initially legalized medical use of cannabis, was one of the first countries to do so, and then legalized non-medical use, recreational use. And so there are dates. We know the year that these changes occurred, and therefore they were able to measure the effects of it. So in Ontario, where they've got very good health records, they've looked at the health records of about 13.5 million people to see what the diagnosis rate of schizophrenia was during those periods before legalization, after legalization, and looked at other things such as psychosis, in other words, delusional beliefs and behavior, which might not qualify for the diagnosis of schizophrenia. And what they showed was that after a little bit more context here, the most potent mind-changing element of cannabis is THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. And in the old days, in the 60s, when people were smoking joints at Woodstock, etc., the level of THC was a fraction of what it is today. So the cannabis that people are consuming is very potent, and THC is thought to be the causative element. Anyway, what's happened since legalization is, and there's been a recent paper on this, is that cannabis use disorder has increased in Canada to the extent that people are turning up in emergency departments with problems associated with their cannabis, addiction, dependence, and sometimes psychological effects as well. And what they've shown is that there's a relationship between cannabis use disorder and schizophrenia. So if you've got it, you've increased your risks of schizophrenia, and there's been more cannabis use disorder since legalization. So the rate of schizophrenia in relation to cannabis use has actually gone up. It's tripled over that period of time. Now, something odd has happened in the statistics, which is, just to be fair to people watching our conversation, is that overall in Ontario, the rate of schizophrenia has not gone up. So in other words, there's still the same number of people with schizophrenia, but that's thought to be a problem, not a problem, an issue where older people don't seem to be diagnosed quite as much as younger people. But putting that to one side, it is worrying that there's this relationship. But what does increase overall, so the overall numbers of schizophrenia hasn't increased, even though the relationship between cannabis use disorder and schizophrenia, both have gone up together, is the rate of psychosis. And you've got an almost doubling of the rate of psychosis in Ontario since legalization of cannabis. So in other words, that's delusional behavior, which might one day end up as being schizophrenia, or may just be one or two troubling episodes. The issue here is not necessarily being against legalization of cannabis. It's more that when you legalize a substance, there's usually a price to pay. And you've just got to understand what that price might be. So you have public health campaigns to warn people cannabis is not a harmless substance.
So did those also who developed cannabis-linked conditions share any common traits, any common backgrounds?
Well, that's a very good question, because that plagues cannabis research. And you and I a few months ago spoke about cannabis research, which looked at the effect on schooling, on brain development and so on. And when you remove the effects, like the people who tend to have problems with cannabis tend to be lower income, not have completed education, in other words, are in poorer circumstances, that affects the story as well, and they're not necessarily being well controlled for. So yes, that could be an influence, but it's such a large study that you think that would wash out in this study.
Okay, that brings us to our topic. We're going to be talking about cannabis and schizophrenia and how they all connect to it, and then just talk a little bit more just on cannabis. So I'm going to explain what schizophrenia is, the cannabis psychosis research that has been done, why THC potency matters, and illegal market dangers, why you should stay away from illegal markets. Also, genetic vulnerabilities. Certain people are genetically vulnerable to psychosis when using marijuana. Okay, what is schizophrenia? Schizophrenia is a serious mental issue. It's long-lasting when it occurs. affects people's thinking, feeling, and behavior. Is where people cannot distinguish what is real and what is not real. And you may have seen cases where people have been acting strange or done strange things, and where they've said, all I do is smoke marijuana, and other people kind of laugh and like, no, you're doing more than smoking marijuana. But in some cases, in some people, it can be just the marijuana. So this is just something that people need to look into. Even if you yourself have been smoking marijuana. I don't smoke marijuana. I don't recommend people smoke at all. Smoking is bad for you. But if you are a marijuana smoker, if you see yourself hallucinating or acting out or just mentally being unstable, smoking marijuana, I would suggest you stop or get some help to stop. Okay, and there's a lot of research going on about cannabis and psychosis. This is one good thing about the kind of cannabis is not completely legal, but just the legal state that cannabis is now is a good thing, because more study can be done into cannabis. It's a good alternative than pain medicine for people. People say it does help with pain to some extent. So that is a good thing, and that's one thing why people say it should be completely legal. But one case where it is right now legally, studies are allowed to be done so people can learn more about cannabis in cases such as this one, people smoking, how it can cause schizophrenia. Okay, since the 1990s, the potency of THC has skyrocketed. You may hear people talk about purple haze and different brands of marijuana, how different strains that they're smoking for it and how that affects them. If I was you, I would stay to the 1990s version, where it's about 4% THC. That is, to me, is a very safe amount. The commercial strain of 15 to 30 that's being pushed heavy now can be pushing it, but definitely the concentration of 70 to 90%, you need to stay away from that. I just see it a long term, that just not being a good thing, especially like with addiction. Anything can be bad for your addiction, not just like cocaine, heroin addiction, marijuana addiction, just like food addiction. When something is not done moderately, in moderation, it can become a problem. And I suggest you grow your own. It's always best to grow your own, because you know what it is, you know what you're growing, and it's cheaper. Speaking of growing your own, illegal market risk. A lot of people still buy marijuana from illegal grows, and these are even more dangerous than the commercial, because a lot of times a lot of pesticides and chemicals are put into the marijuana, where people think that they're actually smoking marijuana, but they're mostly smoking synthetics and chemicals. And that is the real reason why they're acting out or having strange behaviors. Like I was saying, that's one reason why you might act crazy, because the marijuana they're smoking is laced with embalming fluid or is sprayed with something to get people high. And in some cases, they've been found fentanyl is sprayed in it. Because anything that can be liquefied can be put and dried in it, so you really don't know what you're smoking. Grow your own, people. Genetic vulnerabilities. Some people, like I was saying earlier, are genetically disposed. If you know that mental illness runs in your family, marijuana should be something that should be told to all family members that they should not be smoking. Or if they are smoking, make sure that it's at a low THC rate to where it's not affecting their mental health. The main reason for people smoking marijuana is to relax and to calm down, but not become psychotic. And that's why boosting up the THC level, nobody really knows how, at this current time, how it's going to affect the body. But I can tell you that it does put you at more risk, especially if you have a family history of psychotic mental disorder. You hear a lot about CBD and THC. There is a difference. Okay, so THC has a psychoactive compound in cannabis. It's what produces the high in it. This raises the risk of psychosis-like symptoms to vulnerable people. CBD does not have the psychoactive in it. It does not cause a high. This is often used for calming, sleep, and pain inflammation. This is something that a doctor would describe. Okay. And also, it may reduce THC-related anxiety and paranoia that comes from people smoking weed. So if you have a person that's been smoking marijuana and they've been acting very paranoid or anxiety, you might want to say, if they're smoking weed, say, well, don't smoke weed. We're going to get you some CBD. The marijuana seems to be not affecting you good. I suggest CBD. Okay. So also, THC is intoxicating. CBD is not intoxicating. I don't suggest you do that, but in most cases, you probably can take CBD and still be able to drive. But THC, driving while smoking marijuana, is not recommended. That is driving while impaired. Okay. And just to beat this overhead for a second time, who should be the most cautious? Teens and young adults, because their brain is still developing. Your brain is still developed at 25. And what most people that smoke marijuana do is nothing. They sit in front of the TV or the video game pad, but they don't really get much done in life because they might have a job, but they eat, work, smoke weed, sleep, eat, work, smoke weed, sleep, and then 10 years go by and they've done really nothing. They haven't even advanced in their job, not looking to advance. Been working at McDonald's for 10 years and still is just a cashier. Not assistant manager, not the night shift supervisor. No, they're stuck in the same place. But that should be the main issue with marijuana, not psychosis, not bipolarism. So, but with young teens, you should talk to them about it. They think marijuana is just like a cool thing to do. I would tell them, no, you need to find something else, get them involved in sports, or if they don't like sports, get them into learning stuff like fixing cars, putting motors together, building a car. 16-year-olds want cars. Get them a junk car, teach them how to fix on it, change the tires, do things to it. And listed here, I have a couple links from YouTube where they go more in depth if you want to learn more. You got Cannabis and Psychosis. What is schizophrenia, marijuana in the brain, and high potency cannabis risk. And also you can go back to that same video that I showed at the beginning where I think that was out of Australia. They were talking about it. But just something to look at. Just people just need to know what they're putting in their body. It's not just with cannabis, it's with food, definitely with drugs, harmful drugs. Even drugs that come from a doctor's, we got the GLP-1, everybody's taking it. Even that has side effects to it. Just everything has an effect. Just know what it is. Thank you.